Oh, good, the slides showed up. OK, we're off to a good start. Hopefully everyone's in the right room. We're all seated comfortably. We're ready to get going. I really feel for this guy every time I watch this. Oh, almost. Oh. Life is hard. Testing is hard. Writing tests is hard. Running the test is hard. And getting those reports is hard. So I'm Alice Nodelman. I do work for Puppet Labs. I am currently a senior quality engineer. I've worked for over 10 years in quality engineering. I specialize in automation for hard-to-test applications. The harder, the better. That's what I like. I like multi-platform, multi-threaded, multi-API. Anything you can multiply, that's what I'm interested in testing. So when you think about things like that, and the way I think about it is that people are really bad at mundane, repetitive tasks. And computers are really great at them. They love doing them. They want you to go and set them up and just leave them running. And that's what I love doing, is if I can get all of my robots working for me, getting my work done, and I can go off and have a drink or a nap, I'm happy. So that's what I do for a living. So I'm going to be talking today about Beaker. Beaker is an acceptance level testing tool, and we're going to get on the on-ramp to Easy Street, get us away from life is hard. So I know from registration that there's a variety of people in this room. There's going to be people here who are interested in the cloud, people here are interested in testing. There's going to be engineers, module engineers, just a whole variety of people. So I'm hoping where it's appropriate, I've provided some definitions so that we can all kind of be on the same page. So when we're talking about acceptance level testing, a spec test is something that you would use for a small chunk of code. You want to ensure that this chunk of code returns a known exit code. You check that, everything's great, you're happy. When we're talking about acceptance level testing, these are tests that guarantee your promises to your end user. So when we're talking about Puppet, we're talking about the guarantee that it will configure a machine in the way that it says it has. The difficulty with this style of testing is that it's full stack. You need machines, you need Puppet installed on them, you need network. To do this kind of provability that you can maintain that promise to your customer, you're going to need that entire system end to end. So with Beaker, we provide flexible test constructions so you can do that kind of really high-level testing. Beaker uses the cloud very heavily, so we're going to be talking about the cloud a bit. And then finally, kind of, you know, the stuff that I like showing off is the pretty reports. I spent a lot of time working on them. They look really nice, so we're going to show those off a little bit too. Test all the things. Do it. I come from a QA background. I love testing. Things should work. Things should do what we say they're going to do. When it comes to Puppet, it should, you know, everything that you type into the command line should work as promised. Your manifest should execute. Everything should work correctly. That's where we want to get to. So what we provide is tests in Ruby and Bash. So I want to give a little story about the value of a non-proprietary programming language. Now, back in the day, this is quite a while ago now, I was charged with selecting an automated system for a company I worked at. And I got to talk to a whole lot of different vendors, and I got to look at a whole bunch of different styles of testing and different systems. And the issue that we had was you bought the system from the vendor. That's great. That's kind of a one-time transaction. You spend your 10 grand, you get a few seats, you can do your testing. But you can't do your testing because you also have to buy the language in a sense. It's a proprietary language. So you buy it from from your vendor, and they sell you the training, they sell you the books. If you want to learn anything about that language, you are married to them. You can't take it from one job to another. You're totally stuck. If you decide to move away from it, you're going to have to rewrite everything you've got because it's their language. So one of the neat things about Beaker is it uses Ruby and Bash. And I'm not really going to try and sell Ruby and Bash because that's not really the point of this. The point is more that Ruby and Bash already have an incredible amount of documentation along with community support, web pages, online question and answers. You can go buy books in stores. You can go to third-party classes. You can go to like any first-year class at a university. They're going to know about these things, and they can teach them to you. You don't have to talk to us if you don't want to. So when I'm talking about Ruby and Bash, here's just a little potted example of what a Beaker test looks like. And since we're here at Puppet, everyone's probably going to be at least a little familiar with Ruby. It's kind of our in-house language, use it for everything. So this has a lot of like Rubyisms in terms of how a test looks, what the different stages are. And when you look at the things kind of in the single quotes or the double quotes, the strings, those are the execution strings running on your test node. And those are going to come up and they look a lot like shell, because that's what they are. So if you can do an echo hello, you can run this test. What the bonus you get is the DSL. Now, when I came to when I came to Puppet Labs, I was not familiar with what a DSL was, so it's a domain-specific language. I still mess that up all the time. So if you use Puppet, you've already used a DSL because you've used the Puppet DSL. When you're using Beaker, you're going to be using the Beaker DSL, which is a bunch of pre-built methods that encapsulate common testing architecture things you're going to want to do. So it's meant to simplify your writing of your tests because we've already written that code so that you can just take one of those methods, pop it in, and it's going to do what you want to do. So let's have a look at what some of those items are. We do have a larger DSL than this. This is just kind of an interesting little selection. So the first one, they gave me a clicker this morning, so I really want to use it. There we go. Look at those two letters. We got O and N. Now this is the bread and butter of Beaker. On says execute this command on that host. And with those two little letters, you can do arbitrary code execution on any of your test hosts. So if you wanted to, I mean, I don't recommend this, but if you wanted to, you could write entire tests just with the on command, as if you were sitting at the shell on that machine. And you could say, I want it to do this, 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 check this output, test done. You don't have to learn the rest of the Ruby. You don't have to learn the DSL. You can just use what you know. So that's kind of, that's your Swiss Army knife. Anything you want to do, anything you can do as a user, sitting at the shell, you can do with the on command. Now the next two, those are interesting in that they are your convenience methods to getting to a state where Puppet is installed. So they're kind of well named, I hope. We've got install PE and install Puppet. And so one will install Puppet Enterprise, one will install Puppet. These will actually do the installation in multi-node environments. They will do it all for you. They'll set up the master, they'll set up the agents, they'll set up your console, your database, they'll hook it all together. And when it's done, you have a network of hosts with Puppet or PE installed on them. So the next one is just a really short example of moving a file from your coordinator node where you're executing Beaker from onto a host. I think I threw this one on because I thought it was a little interesting as to some of the bonuses that you get from using the Beaker DSL is that little ignore line in there. And what ignore does is it just says, copy everything from my coordinator node to this host, but I'm really not interested in that Git directory, so just ignore that. So it's kind of a handy little feature. You're copying a file over one to the other. That's what you can use. When it comes to test construction, this stuff I think is really clean and well written. Some of this was here before I started at Beaker, so I'm really happy that this is how some of the construction came together. So yeah, please give your test a descriptive name. If you're running a chunk of code, call it a step. The teardown function is there. It doesn't matter if the test fails out or completes. It ensures that that will be executed at the end of your test. So please leave your nodes in a clean state so that the next test will succeed or fail without any bleed over or cascading failures. Then you have the really simple fail test, pass test. So I'm going to throw out here, I've given a little overview of what the DSL can offer you. Ruby is extensively documented using YardDoc, which means that all of these documents, all of the different DSL methods and what you can do with them are available on RubyDoc, and there's a link at the end. So here we have put it all together, and I've just included, this is actually a real test that we run. This is run on, I believe, this is run many, many times against any version of Puppet that we release. This is within our continuous integration system. So this is just ensuring that, what is this doing? I think I copied this one out because it was nice and short so I could actually fit it on a slide and still have it be readable. So it's just saying that if you have a cache, it'll use the cache. And you can see, I think that these tests are really nice because they're very self-explanatory. You can read this and you can understand what's going on. And if you don't understand it, you can add more steps, more documentation, more information that'll appear in the logs. So I'm sure you've also heard of beaker-rspec. I know there's a couple of other speakers, and if you come from the module testing world, you've ended up touching this. So Beaker DSL, its genesis is that the module testing team is already very comfortable with an rspec style testing system. They like the way the tests are formed, how the tests are written. But we wanted to have one test system, and we're trying to, and I think we've succeeded in a lot of ways, at having one test system to rule them all, and that's Beaker. So what beaker-rspec is it's mostly just a very tiny shim. And what it does is it gives you the Beaker DSL within rspec style test construction. And as a bonus, we threw in server spec, because why not? And that gives you beaker-rspec. And so here's a comparison example of what a test looks like within beaker-rspec. And you can see, if you're familiar with rspec, it goes through describe and context blocks. And that is your means of, if you're comfortable with this style of test construction, it's a great way to get into Beaker. You still have full access to the Beaker DSL. Everything I was talking about before, the install PE, you can see it being run in this example. So you have install PE, you still have the full DSL, but you're in an rspec style test. So this is what our module testing system is dependent upon. All right. So where do we test this stuff? I'm talking a lot about testing and nodes and all this. Where are we getting the nodes from? Now, the way I like to think about this is in terms of packages. So I have a letter, and I want to send that letter, just to my friend, happy birthday, here's a card. I would probably walk down to the post office and just send it USPS, get there in a couple of weeks. I'd feel really good, my friend would feel really good, everybody's happy. Now, if I'm ordering something from Amazon, that is probably coming UPS. Maybe I'm getting a signature confirmation on it, maybe I'm getting some tracking information, it's a larger box. What if I'm sending something overseas? What if I have to purchase an entire crate? That's an entire different shipping problem. And so when you're looking at Beaker, we're looking at the means of meeting your current shipping needs. Do you need the UPS, or do you need international shippers? And we're trying to manage all of those within Beaker. So we provide a gigantic list of virtualization options. And I think what's really neat about this stuff is that when you start writing a test, you don't have to care which virtualization technique you're using. The tests all look the same. Basically, you get access to a node object that you can contact. You can run that magic on command. But within Beaker itself, it handles all the API calls, all the setup, all the management, the networking. All of that stuff is hidden. You don't need to know about it. That's Beaker's problem. And by extension, that's my problem. So here we go. I like drawing pictures with clouds on them. We all love clouds. Here's a really kind of, this is the very basic of how it operates. You could extend this out to have 15 to 1,000 agents. But you have a centralized coordinator. It contacts out to your clouding option of choice. It could be local with Vagrant. It could be in-house with a vSphere setup. It could be out-of-house with EC2 or Google Compute. And then once it has those set up, it can communicate with them. It has control of all the nodes, but there's also then the interconnections between, say, masters and agents that we're all used to with Puppet. So a good way of explaining this is how we use it actually internally to Puppet, because we use Beaker for all of our testing, and heavily and every day. So when you're looking at me, I'm the lead Beaker developer. I'm mucking with this stuff all day long. I prefer to use Fusion boxes. They load fast, very disposable, very quick. I can do it offline. I can work on a plane. Doesn't matter if I don't have internet. So I can keep going. That's fast, easy, disposable. Within our QA team, they're dependent on the Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. They like it because they don't have to maintain any of it themselves. I don't mind maintaining my own virtual machines. They're not interested in doing that for some crazy reason. So they can go and they can just contact Amazon, pull in a box, do their testing, throw it back. When you're looking at our continuous integration system, we want the ease of that EC2 system, but we also want some more reliability and some more control. So we manage that in-house with a vSphere kind of vCloud setup. So you can see that even though all of the Beaker tests that we're executing are the same, we're executing them through different virtualizations. And Beaker controls all of that under the hood. I really think that puns are coming back. So get those reports to me right meow. So if you've executed the test, you're going to want to know what happened. What was the end result? Now, I wrote this down as the noisy scroll. In my worst moments, I just call it the terminal puke. So when you're executing Beaker, this is what you're going to see constantly scrolling by. This is all the information. In this case, I'm executing some tests on a couple of CentOS boxes. So you can see that I've executed, I have the amount of time it took to execute each command on those particular hosts. I'm getting a lot of information out of that. And when it finally completes, I get this little summary. And I think that this is pretty enough. But I'm also not a web developer, and I'm not a designer. So I'm like, this is great. But when I came to Puppet, they're like, no, this isn't great. Everybody hates reading this. Nobody can understand what's going on. So this is a lot prettier. I'm pretty opposed to live demos. There is a demo of this up and available on GitHub. Again, I'm going to provide a link to it at the end of the talk. But I just knew that I'd have technical difficulties. So we're just going to kind of pretend to click through it as we go. So this is the new output. This is actually the same test run. If you look at this, you can see there's a total of 130 tests. This one has 131 just because it's including a pre-suite option. But this is actually the same test run. But you can tell me, how much more readable is this? So you can say, look, it's all green. As long as you're not red-green colorblind, you're set. So let's click in here. Let's click onto that test node, because everything expands and contracts. Look, there's a properties section, and then there's all your individual tests. Let's click in again. Here are the individual properties you ran this with. So this tells you the entire setup. It actually scrolls a lot longer than this. Beaker has an incredible amount of configuration options. So this will tell you exactly what you ran this test with. If you're seeing something wonky, you can track it down in there. Now, if you click on the test itself, then you can get back to your terminal puke. So if you actually are having trouble with the test, you can select it. It will show up as red if it failed, yellow if it's a skip test. You can go into it and look at individual components and really get it out of that log. Because when I'm looking at that terminal and I've got that tiny scroll bar at the side, and I need to find the information about an individual test, it's a really painful time. This is a lot less painful. This is actually just 2 files. Again, as I said, I am not a designer. So this is made with Beaker will dump XML output. Again, if you want to write your own interface to this, that would be pretty cool. So it's all in XML. Beaker generates it, dumps it out. And this is all generated with an XSLT using Twitter Bootstrap, because they know how to design things, and I know how to use their tools. So here's all the links I was talking about. We got Beaker on GitHub, Beaker Wiki, Beaker Docs. I provided a link to the Puppet acceptance tests. The best way to write a new Beaker test is to look at an old Beaker test and see what other people have done. This is because we're still working on writing a style guide. So mostly just stick with the style that other people have already used, and things are going to go OK. And I was talking about before, you can you can go and click here for the Beaker report. And then you can actually click through and see what those drop-downs are like and how pretty and awesome it is. So I think we made it. We made it off that Onramp. We're on Easy Street. We got Beaker there. We're happy. We wrote our tests. We made use of these awesome tools. We used a variety of clouding systems. And we have reporting. Oh, and it looks like I left a good amount of time for questions. So I'm happy to answer questions, please. Also, it's really hard to see up here, so you may need to wave a little bit. Oh, over there.
Can you pull high-res data into your Beaker tests?
Can you pull HIRA data into your Beaker tests? You can, Beaker actually does have wrappers for installation of HIRA itself. So that again, with scopy and the ability to move data around, yes, you can. We actually have suites of HIRA tests running internally. I think back there.
Can you say more about how Beaker configures its environment of nodes? You had a big list of 6 or 7 different choices of where you can get those nodes, and I'm curious about how with 1 or 2 commands it knows exactly how to give me what I want.
Sure. So one of the things I don't have included here is the host configuration file. So when you run a Beaker command, you provided a host file. And what the host file has is a section called hosts, where you provide a set of hosts, names and associated information. We have the concept within Beaker of roles. So you can assign host number 1 will be my master, who will also handle the task of being, say, the dashboard and the database. And then you have a series of other nodes, and those are your agents. And so what Beaker does is when it's going through its startup, it has a look at that file, reads that information, and says, OK, I have a master here, and I've been asked to install PE. And that's how it makes those decisions. When it's coming to the virtualization options, that's another option from within the host configuration file. So you would provide it with a hypervisor, and it supports kind of, these all are mapped to shorter names of the hypervisor support. So I think for Amazon, you would say hypervisor EC2. And it would say, OK, we're starting this run. We're doing EC2. So I'm going to go and do a call out. You do have to provide it with like a .fog file, which has your credentials within it. And at that point, then it's capable of contacting it. I think maybe the other missing component there is that Beaker always assumes that it can do passwordless root SSH access to test nodes. So basically part of my job is to go on Linux forums, and anytime they say, this is desperately insecure, never do this, that's the stuff I read, because passwordless root SSH is not the greatest idea, but it's really awesome for testing. Did that cover everything?
I think so, yeah.
OK, great. Right here?
Just to sort of add on to that, can you talk a little bit about when you're doing that and you're having Beaker spin up an environment for you, and then it's going to test that environment, how does the actual Puppet configuration get orchestrated as part of all of that process, which is actually what you're testing?
Right. So after you've done your installation of Puppet on the host with the install Puppet command or install PE command, depending on what you're trying to install. Within the DSL are a number of options. So you can say with master on, and a number of other one of those that wrap up you provide it with a link on your Beaker coordinator to a configuration file of some sort. And it will apply that configuration and then do a Puppet apply. And at that point, you can check output exit codes. One of the things that is built in within that is the ability to monitor those exit codes depending upon whether you're looking for, with Puppet, you can monitor for no change in state or change state or error, right? You can monitor for all of those things. And then that's a way of constructing a test to see if your Puppet configuration applied correctly. Let's see. Been monitoring this side a lot here, right in front.
Go a little bit deeper. I saw that basically you were using Jenkins in one of the slides. I mean, in the output.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to. I mean, does he actually use Jenkins in the backend to spin up the test on the nodes? Or?
No, Jenkins is used. Within Puppet Labs for our continuous integration pipeline, and Jenkins is telling Beaker to start the tests. Beaker itself doesn't use any Jenkins tools. You can run Beaker from your command line.
Okay,
Cool.
Does this have the ability to SSH into hosts outside of your configuration files to do some tests? Like, we have appliances maybe that we want to SSH into and see that they've been configured properly.
Well, one of the things that you can do, as long as these hosts are accessible on your network, And you have passwordless SSH to them, which Beaker will presuppose that that exists. You do have the option within your host file to provide hosts with no hypervisor or none. And at that point, it'll add it to your hosts, the hash of hosts, because it's Ruby, so everything's a hash. And at that point, then you can run on commands on those, and it will just attempt to set up kind of a standard SSH connection. And then you can run whatever you want on those hosts. So you're not tied to the cloud as well. It is an option. Sometimes we will have people who will set up a network and then reuse it. And so they'll actually kind of have a new host file that does, just specifies hypervisor none, so it can reuse what is already set up. Let's look over on this side. Anybody over here? Oh, over there.
Right now, a lot of the Beaker configuration, you do environmental variables on the one line, I think. Is there any plan to have that in either a rake file or some sort of file that you do?
There has been some effort into rake files. One of the things we want to do, which is make it possible to basically have this stuff be interchangeable, so that anything that you can control from the Beaker command line, you can control through an environment variable and vice versa. We're also, one of the things you can do at the moment is kind of like it's hidden, is the ability to set everything from the host configuration file. You can have a definition of hosts. It's just a YAML file. You can have a host and you can have a config section. And if you know how that variable looks internally, unfortunately, because it's just going to merge it in, so it's not going to do any mangling for you or any cleanup, it will automatically merge that into its hash of options. So that's kind of a cheatery way of getting to that point, but we do need to do a lot of work in terms of our argument, how we manage arguments of various sorts. Just because Beaker, it's kind of a pro and con. It handles configuration variables from the command line, from the environment, from the host configuration file. And I think there was a couple more ways that you can actually force configuration into it. And managing all that is very difficult, and deciding who wins configuration wars of I set it from the command line, but this environment variable disagrees. So I think the abilities are there, but it's not very clean right now.
Are you looking at adding the ability to use pseudo accounts instead of direct root?
Pseudo accounts instead of direct root. Unlikely. When we're looking at this, we're not looking at it from a security perspective. We're looking at this from a test perspective. So it's totally disposable. So do not run this, kind of on your local machine.
But how do you test that you set your SSH options correctly for not allowing root logins?
All right, so you're wanting to test the SSH control within Puppet itself, right? And I think you've probably caught the catch-22 there. We are starting to allow the generation of more commands that run owned by different users, so that while you need to have that root SSH, you could run a command as another user. And so we're doing upgrades to on, so you can go on as, basically, so that you can provide it with a command and a user. Oh, in the back. So this is a question about how do you install a module pre-testing? Is that?
More so like external dependencies that be required, such as the example that came up for us was a Puppet file server, specifically. Having to replicate that within the cluster that you bring up.
Okay, so one of the things is that Beaker does go through 3 test phases. We use these pretty heavily internal to Puppet, is that you can provide for Beaker a pre-suite, a test suite, and a post-suite. And so this would be a good candidate for part of the pre-suite. And usually within our own pre-suites, we're looking at doing the installation of Puppet and any additional configuration. And that means that it removes that from kind of all of the rest of the logging that comes with the rest of the test execution. So if we look, you can see here that we have the pre-suite, and within that pre-suite, all I'm doing is installing PE so I can run through the rest of the Puppet tests I was interested in. So I would say that that's a good candidate for writing a test file. It would look the same as your other Beaker test files, but you would run it as part of the pre-suite, just to get it separated out.
Follow on to that question, is there a syntax for that in RSpec as well?
RSpec, it does not currently support the concept of a pre-suite, but within RSpec itself, you can use the before. So you can just do a before each and have that behave as a pre-suite with those commands. Oh, over here. Oh yeah, the one's right in the middle. So in my blind spot over here. Yes, you can. We do support testing on Windows. The limitation there is that the Windows boxes, we're actually accessing them with Cygwin, which has some difficulties in terms of permissioning. At the moment, it's been able to cover our testing needs to confirm that our acceptance tests work on Windows. But yeah, when you're talking about Puppet and when you're talking about PE, we do test during our continuous integration lifestyle. Windows is definitely in there, and this is definitely supported on Windows. Again, when I was talking about that on command, once you have Cygwin, you have a bash-style environment, which is pretty much all that Beaker is asking for. Any other questions? Oh, there are. Over here.
Is it possible to have Beaker run your RSpec tests for your modules as part of your testing on the remote hosts?
So testing using beaker-rspec for testing on your remote nodes?
No. So when you build a module, you might have an RSpec test along to go with the module. Is it possible that Beaker run your module RSpec test before testing things on remote hosts?
Oh, I see. So before it goes through its provisioning phase, it could run your spec tests. At the moment, I would say no. We do handle that. Beaker itself, like how do we test the testers? Beaker does have its own Jenkins CI, and we do go through a spec test phase. And so I'd actually recommend, just from the Jenkins side, the multi-job tester is really good at that stuff. So I tell it not to execute its Beaker tests until it's past spec. So I would say that go one level up instead of trying to cram it into Beaker itself. Well, in the back.
So the output you showed looked like it's interacting directly with Dash and sort of waiting for a prompt and then executing something and reading the output there. Is that what's going on, or is it running commands through SSH?
It is running commands through SSH. You can specify that you want it to be assigned like a term if you want kind of more terminal style. But yes, these are all being run through an SSH thing. Just the output, to make it more readable, we make it appear that you're at the command line. Any additional questions over here?
How do you handle like node orchestration in terms of like building a cluster out? I need to have nodes 1 and 2 up before 3 becomes the replicate set, for example.
That doesn't seem like something Beaker currently handles. We set up all of our nodes sequentially right now. So they're going to go the order that you define them within your host file. So we just do one after the other after the other. And we're actually looking, just because of the speed issues with some of that, like when you're looking at some of these virtualization or hypervisors that are a little slow, we'd like to start doing that concurrently. And that would be where we could get interested in which ones come up when. One more over here.
So are you guys using Beaker to provision and confirm your production environments as well?
We do not currently do that. Beaker is responsible for all of its own provisioning when it comes to testing. It is an interesting kind of side effect of Beaker, which can be used. I think we've been trying to encourage people within, say, our customer service kind of internal organization, because Beaker is capable of bringing up hosts of nodes and configuring them and then leaving them for you to use. So I guess that's a kind of an additional bonus feature, is that you don't have to use this as an acceptance tester. You can just use it as a cloud provisioner, kind of a cloud provisioner with some bonus configuration options. So we don't use it for that job internally. but it is available to you.
Will it also tear down?
It will. Basically, there's a couple of command line options and environment options where you can tell it whether or not you want to kill everything, kill in case that there was a failure. Kill only if there was not a failure, and then just always keep alive. Okay, well, I think they want me to get moving. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm available for further questions. Thank you.